Okay, then today on the show, I have an absolute rarest of the rare of the rare of the rare of the rarest of guests. She was the first ever female referee in the WWF, Miss Rita Chatterton. How are you doing today?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. We had a few technical problems, so if anyone is wondering why this is recorded on Zoom, we had like an hour of very technical problems. Nothing to do with us. It was just outside factors and phones and bits and pieces like that. But we're here now anyway, and it's nice to talk to you today. I know like you haven't really done an interview like this in about 30 years, like we touched on earlier. So really appreciate you talking to me today.
It's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely been a little bit.
Yeah, so look, if we rewind to your life before you became involved in wrestling, like what was it like and what did you do and what did you want to do kind of when you were growing up?
Prior to wrestling, I actually wanted to go into either teaching or medicine, but I had a younger brother, and wrestling was his dream, and he was just avid. Every Sunday, most people would be going to church. We would be watching wrestling. And every Sunday, it was like, I'm going to be a wrestler someday. I'm going to be a wrestler someday. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. Little boy's dream. We didn't think much of it. Okay, you'll grow out of that. But he didn't grow out of it. When he was 18, unfortunately, I lost him in a car accident. And the day that he was killed, I went into his room and there was a notepad there, and he had a list of wrestling schools and who he had talked to and how he was going to pay for it. And I realized that day that he still wanted to be a wrestler. That was something that was still a part of his dream. And I looked at my dad and I said, I'm going to do it for him somehow, some way. I'm going to do it for him. Took 5 years. It took 5 years before I could get into training because I was a single parent. I had a daughter, divorced, needed to save money, needed to figure it all out, but it happened. It took some time and it happened. And I drove Tony Altimore crazy. Tony didn't want to train me in the very beginning. So drove the man nuts. I'd call him 2 or 3 times a week at the gym. You ready? You training the referees yet? No. You training referees? No. And at first, didn't even want to be a referee in the beginning.
Okay.
Let me step back here a little bit. I was working for Wonder Bread at the time, and I was going up a hill, big hill in my truck, and my lung collapsed. And
Okay.
I pulled the truck over. Don't ask me how I managed to pull the truck over, but I pulled the truck over, and another driver happened to be coming up behind me, thought I broke down and pulled over behind me. And I ended up in the hospital. I ended up having major lung surgery. And at that point figured, okay, well, there goes wrestling. There's no way. I mean, they pretty much cut me in half. It took 120 stitches to close me back up after the surgery.
Wow.
So I kind of figured, yeah, that's the end of that. So I'm laying in the hospital, and my dad came to visit, and wrestling happened to be on. It was a Sunday, and wrestling was on, and we were watching wrestling, and this light went off, and I said, I can't be a wrestler for him, but there's no reason why I can't be a referee. And that's when I started driving Tony Altimore crazy, because I knew, Tony was a wrestler for years. He was the best referee I had ever seen. And if anybody was going to train me, I wanted it to be him. Well, he didn't have the same idea. He was like, yep, nope.
What was
But I drove the
Tony's
man nuts.
what was his reluctance, Rita, and not wanting to train you?
Being a female, he wouldn't tell me that at the time. At the time, it was just, no, I don't train referees. No, I'm not training referees. Later on, he told me it was because I was a female. But and the agreement we had when he finally decided to train me was that he would help me get my New York State license, but he would not help me get into the WWF. And he didn't. he stuck right to his word. He did not.
Yeah.
But it was crazy. It was pretty crazy. I met a lot of good people in that wrestling school. Mario Mancini, Dave Barbie, AJ Patrizzi. It's Seth Cohen. I mean, they were all wrestlers back with me at the time. It was like a little family. Yeah. kind of bonded together because you went through a lot together.
Yeah.
You know,
And
throwing
what,
around that ring and getting bounced off the turnbuckles. It's like, yeah. So
and whilst Tony didn't help you then get into the WWF, how did that opportunity arise, or how did it come about?
okay, well, I got my license in New York State, and the way it worked back then was New York State assigned the referees.
Okay.
So because I was a New York State, the licensed referee in New York State, they would assign me to different matches. And I'd work a few matches and I would send resume after resume after resume to WWF. At the time it was WWF. And I would call, and I did as far as Vince's secretary, and she'd tell me to send a resume. And I told her, I've sent 25 of them already. Would you open one up, please, and give it to Vince? And it was crazy. So that absolutely got me nowhere. About 6 months later, I was in Glens Falls at the Civic Center in Glens Falls, New York. And after the match, I worked a couple of matches. And after the match, I happened to stop in a store, a little grocery store here in town, and Blackjack Mulligan was in there. And I refereed his match that night. And he said hello, and we got talking a little bit. And he says, "What's the matter?" He says, "You seem pretty down." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get more work from the WWF, but I can't get past Vince McMahon's secretary. I've called him and called him and called him." And he said, "Well, that's because you're calling the wrong person." And at that time, a man named George Scott was Vince McMahon's right-hand man. Okay. And he said, anything that goes to Vince has to go through George. So he talked to George about me, told George about my match, that I had worked his match, and got me in contact with George. And the next thing I know, I come home from work one day and my phone was ringing. And I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And he said, this male voice said, "May I speak with Rita Marie, please?" Well, the only people that called me Rita Marie was anybody that had anything to do with wrestling. And I'm like, right. This is Rita. He says, "Hey, Rita, Vince McMahon here." And I almost fell on the floor. I'm like, and it was like, here's the man I've been calling for months, and now he's finally calling me. And then he says, I understand you talked with George, and he and Blackjack Mulligan were pretty impressed, and we want to get some TV on you. Can you be in Madison Square Garden in like 2 days? I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. Because it was like just such a, going from not working at all to Madison Square Garden. I mean, that's huge. And that's how it all started. I filmed my first match the day before my birthday. It was January 21st, 1985 in Madison Square Garden. That was the first televised match I'd ever done. And it just took off from there.
Yeah. And what age were you then, Rita? First
27. My first match was actually in Middletown in August of 1984. August of 1984. It was at a fairgrounds, but that was before McMahon knew about me. In fact, that's kind of an interesting story. This is my very, very first match. I'm scared to death. Never did this before. Going to work in front of people. Oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah.
I get to the fairgrounds and I pull up, and the guy says, it's like $10 or whatever it was to get in. And I said, well, I'm the referee for tonight for wrestling. And he started laughing. I was like, yeah, sure you are. I was like, no, I really am. So I showed him my license, and he said, oh, okay. And he let me in, showed me where to go. Now, at the time, I was driving a 77 Firebird, really sweet, souped up, really nice car. And I'm in the back, and I'm leaning against my car, and Pat Patterson comes walking over, and he says, who are you here with? And I said, well, I'm here with myself. He said, look, this is for the wrestlers. You can't be back here. And it's like, well, I'm your referee for tonight. And he started laughing at me. He's like, sweetheart, you got to do better than that. I've been around here for 30 years. You're no referee. And I was like, well, do you want to see my license? He's like, yeah. So I go in the car, I get my license, I hand him my license, and he looks at the license, and he looks at me, and he looks back at the license, and he looks at me, and he's just shaking his head no, and he literally throws the license at me and says, who in their right effing mind would give a female a referee's license? and he stormed away.
Wow.
And he went into this little travel trailer, and had no idea who was in there, but you could hear him screaming. Had no idea, you couldn't make out what he was saying, but he was screaming. And a couple of minutes later, Jay Strongbow comes walking over to me and he says, can I see your license, please? So I hand him my license. And again, he looks at my license, looks at me, looks at my license, looks at me, hands me back the license, and he just turns around, starts walking away, and he's shaking his head no. And he's like, and he goes into the travel trailer. Now the screaming starts all over again. I'm like, okay.
Was
But
there
10 minutes or so later, I'm having a heart attack. I mean, my heart's pounding out of my chest. I'm like, oh my God, I'm scared to death to begin with. And then I get this kind of crap going on. Thank God. And luckily, Tony Altimore somewhat prepared me for it, because he told me when I finally do get there, they're not going to be happy. He was right. They weren't. Well, 10 minutes or so later, Richard Herring, who was the athletic commissioner, New York State athletic commissioner at the time, gets there, and he was the one who assigned me for the night. And he walks over and says, Rita, I'm so glad you can make it, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, I'm not quite sure how long you're going to feel that way. He's like, why? So I tell him what happens. He says, okay. He says, well, don't worry about it. Easy for you to say, right?
Yeah.
So now he goes in this travel trailer, and the screaming starts all over again. I'm like, great. A few minutes later, now I'm trying to get my bearings. And like I said, Tony had prepared me for this, so I was kind of ready for it. And Pat Patterson, Jay Strongbow, and Richard Herring come walking over to me. And Pat Patterson's got a fistful of money. And he walks over to me and says, here, take this. And I looked at him and I said, what's that? And he says, you're getting paid for tonight, but you're not refereeing anything.
Wow.
And I looked at him and said, yes, I am. He just kind of stood back, and I said, look, if I don't referee tonight, I will sue you personally, and I will sue you, and I will sue you. And I pointed to the other two. I said, and then I will sue the WWF, because I'm a good referee. I've worked hard for it. And yes, I am working. Okay. They storm away. Rich Herring kind of looks at me and smiles, because he just assigned me. So I ended up doing, my very first match was a women's tag team match. And I found out a few months later that Pat Patterson told the women to break my legs and make sure I never wanted to get in the ring again. Luckily, being women, they, instead of doing anything to hurt me, they helped me. And that's how I got started. Yeah. Patterson was. But, but it was crazy. And it was like, it was a crazy world. And things were so much different back then. But luckily, the women knew that you had to work 10 times as hard for a quarter of the recognition that the men got at the time. So instead of doing anything to hurt, they actually helped me. So that was my first experience.
That was one of the things I was going to say to you about how difficult it would have been in the 80s as a woman trying to get into that kind of masculine, muscular kind of business, and with the way things were back then, like compared to the way things are now, that kind of stuff wouldn't have been tolerated in this day and age. Would it be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Today, things I don't think they would even have the nerve to do that or say that, come right out and tell me you're not refereeing anything. You're a woman who would give a woman a referee's license. I mean, they wouldn't even think about saying that today. But back then they had no problem with it.
Yeah. When you look back on that time, and you say obviously there'll be some kind of negative experiences, but if you were to pick out, like, who were the people that you got on with backstage, and who were the guys that you said, yes, I can trust this guy, or I can trust this guy? Who were the cool ones?
Well, the very few, to be honest with you. Hulk Hogan was always a great guy. He was always out there for the kids, always, talking with the kids. So he was always nice. Andre the Giant and I became very, very good friends. Mario Mancini, he and I went to school together. We trained with Tony Altimore. Mario and I became very good friends. But pretty much because of being a female, I didn't really interact a whole lot with the guys. I always had a separate dressing room, which was usually a ladies' room somewhere. And most of the interaction would be, okay, well, you're going to do this match and so-and-so is going to win. And this is how they're going to win. They're going to win with a sunset flip, or they're going to win with, with a clothesline off the rope, or, and that would be it. They wouldn't tell me anything else. So I kind of had to wing pretty much everything, and didn't really get to know a whole lot of, knew them, knew hello, how are you? But that was pretty much the extent of most of it. At the rings, there was different places we would stay, different hotels and stuff that we would stay. And a lot of them had bars where you would go to the bar and have a drink here and there. So you get to talk to, a little bit of them then, but the majority of it was pretty hush hush. Here you go. Yeah. As far as they were concerned, for me, it was like, here's your hat. What's your hurry? Kind of goodbye.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah. Cause Mario told me that when you went into the business, one of the things that he said to you was stay away from the guys. Was that because people liked to party back then? It was the 80s. It was pretty much they were living kind of rock and roll lifestyles. Yeah. Some of these guys, weren't they?
Oh, they all were. Yeah. They all were. They all had their share of what they used to call arena rats, which were girls that would hang around the backstage and try and meet the guys. And so it was always pretty much, just stay away. And I didn't have a problem with that. I was engaged. I had a very happy home life. I, didn't have a problem with that. So, but they, like I said, it had its moments. It got pretty crazy.
Anything spring to mind?
I'm sorry?
I said, does anything spring to mind from something you may have seen backstage, or anything funny, or any kind of prank that anyone played? Or I always kind of throw in that question.
Yeah, well, one of the things that kind of totally threw me off is, as I said earlier, they never really shared with me what was going on. So I was doing a midget match one time, and Little Beaver came up behind me and bit me in the back end. I'm like, I understand why a dog chases his tail around, because I'm running around in circles trying to get this person off my back end. So I don't know if that was planned. I don't know if that was if it just happened because they didn't share things with me, but it was quite interesting.
Yeah. And when you look back, we'll say, into the locker rooms, and was there anyone in that locker room that was kind of, they always talk about, this was later on, that the Undertaker was the locker room leader in his era and stuff like that, but was there anyone there who was kind of manning the troops, I guess, and who would be listened to backstage?
Oh, always Andre. Andre was called Boss. Everybody called him Boss. Everybody but me. He wouldn't let me call him Boss. He used to tell me, you're my friend. I'm not your boss. But definitely Andre. Beyond that, I really, I wasn't in the room with the guys. Yeah. So their interactions were whatever happened out in the hallway, which were very slim. There wasn't a whole lot that went on in the hall.
Yeah.
Other than kind of passing through.
Yeah.
But still a pretty interesting part of my life.
Yeah, as an Irishman, I always look and I see this thing come up online every so often. I don't know if it's true that Andre the Giant holds the Guinness World Record for drinking the most amount of beers in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, he does. He did. Yeah. That boy could drink. I'll tell you, that boy. We would go to dinner, and just at dinner, for the half hour, 45-minute dinner while we were eating, he would down 3 bottles of wine with no problem at all. It's like, yeah, bring out the twin sister. Isn't there a triplet to that bottle? And wow. And oh my God, that man could put it away. I believe the record is like 156 bottles or cans of beer in one sitting.
Oh,
that's insane.
Like, I know the guy was huge, but where did he put it? My God.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, but he was a big boy, but he, a lot of his drinking was because of the pain. He was constantly in pain.
Yeah.
So it kind of helped with that. And
And because of
But
his
he
size
was,
as well, he was well able to handle it.
yes, he was. And
Yeah.
he, like I said, he was a good man. Andre was a good man, very generous, very kind.
Yeah. Yeah. Our good friend Mr. Mario Mancini does be on this podcast quite a bit, and he always throws in like hidden gems of stories he's told. Some about who was he told the Undertaker. Obviously, he was Undertaker's first match. He gave a great Hulk Hogan story, gave things like that. I want to hear a good Mario Mancini story from you.
Ah, the first time I refereed Mario, it was a little arena and somewhere, wasn't televised, little place. He played that off so well that I kind of, as a referee, I went running over to him because he's my friend. I trained with him. And he played that off so well. I'm leaning over. I'm like, honey, are you okay? You all right? And he's like, I'm all right. Yeah, come on. And it was like, but I really, truly believed he was hurt. I was like, do I need to get help for you or what? But it was like, he was just crazy. He would do whatever it took to sell, and sell he did. He was hired as a jobber, which is someone that gets paid to lose to the bigger talent, and there was no one better. There was no one better. Like I say, you're in the ring and what's going on, and yet it's like, are you all right? Because it was just the looks on his face and the moans and the groans, and I'm like, holy crap, is he all right? So, but he's another good man,
Yeah.
Few good men out there.
A few
idiots, but a few good men.
Mario and yourself, and we need to touch on this. We're in the New York Post recently the New York Magazine, my apologies, for as a news story that's everybody will know about, and I don't really need to mention what it is. And I will put the link in this video to the article as well. But I just want to know how the process of that came about and how it all kind of came to light again just recently.
Well, it pretty much came to light. I had met Abraham Reisman, and had talked with him about my referee days, and this was after I had received the award from the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, McMahon was in the papers again for paying hush money, and Mr. Reisman called me and asked me a few questions. I answered a few questions for him. Next thing I know, we're in the magazine, and here we are. It's things are crazy. My phone is going crazy with people wanting me to do interviews, wanting me to do television, wanting me to do this show and that show. At this point, I have chosen not to do anything. Doesn't mean I won't in the future, but at this point, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. So I'm just going to sit back, take my time, think about it, and figure it out.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to see it, they're more than welcome to read the article. It's New York Magazine. Or if they want to know the rest of the story, I reported this story 30 years ago with Geraldo Rivera on Now It Can Be Told, and that's on YouTube. So they're more than welcome to go and see it there. But as far as I'm concerned, at this point, right now, today in my life, I'm just not even going there. I'm not going there in my life again. It still hurts. The whole thing still hurts. The whole thing still bothers me. So I would really just rather not go there.
Yeah, and we discussed that we're not going to go into details about that anyway. But you said the whole with Vince McMahon coming back into the news, that's how this kind of came about. So I take it that you're not surprised that he was back in the news for this kind of thing.
No, not at all. Not. I'm surprised it's taken this long, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, none of it surprises me.
Yeah, and with stuff like this, there's always kind of more coming. You have the feeling that like I've got the feeling that this is just not quite it. You know, when some people kind of
Yeah, the tip of the iceberg.
the tip of the iceberg. I've got a feeling that there's more on the way, but that's nothing that I know about or anything like that. That's just my guess. So,
Yeah. I would say it's a good guess. I don't know anything. I don't know anything either at this point, but I would say that's a good guess.
yeah, yeah. Um, Social media and things like that. You kind of you stepped away from the wrestling business, as you said, after that point in your life. Um,
Right.
do you get reminded of it much, or do you go online and you search these things, or what are people saying about me? And because people still do talk about you in the business.
The last couple of weeks I have, yeah. Just to see what's going on out there, just out of curiosity. But it brings back a lot. It was a long time ago, but it still brings back a lot. When Seth asked me to do the Hall of Fame with him, yeah, I said no. I wanted no part of it. And he's like, but Rita, we want you to have the first Trailblazer Award, and on and on and on. And he wouldn't, he was relentless. He wouldn't let up. And then he got my daughter involved, and between the two of them, they get kind of ganged up on me. And I was like, all right, you know what? It's right here in Albany. I know everybody that's going to be there. I don't have a problem with the people that are going to be there. It'll be a thank you very much. See you, hi, goodbye, and done. Well, that's not how it's turning out. So
Yeah, yeah. I always,
people are coming out of the.
yeah. I always say to people that I talk to, writers and editors and magazine workers and any kind of people from the business, and what we always say is, and most of these guys might not even be involved in it anymore, but it's like once you put your foot in that door of the wrestling business, it seems that no matter what, you're never quite out of it.
Right. But, it's kind of like riding a Harley. Once you get on the bike and you ride, you want to continue to ride.
Yeah.
And it gets in your blood, and wrestling gets in your blood, and it did in mine. And like I said, I put it aside for a long, long, long time. But once I stepped back in, there's a lot of good things about wrestling. It's not, I've had some really horrid experiences, but it's not all horrid experiences. I've had some really good experiences. I've made a few good friends. Andre the Giant and I were very good friends. Mario Mancini and I were friends, and some things like that, makes it priceless.
Mm-hmm. When you did go out with the business, what did you turn your life to then, and what have you kind of been doing since then for people that might want to know?
I started working with children, with mainly New York City kids. I worked at Berkshire Farms as a youth care counselor, and I worked at Vanderheiden as also a youth care counselor, Vanderheiden Hall in my area, which was very rewarding. You take kids and help them turn negatives into positives.
Yeah.
And then some of the kids had found out about my wrestling, and I was like, see, that's proof that you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it. And they were like, wow, you were the first female referee. How did you do that? And it's like, I worked hard for it. It wasn't handed to me. Tony Altimore didn't just say, here you go. I worked hard. I was there every weekend working out and training, and it was hard. And Tony finally said, okay, go get your license. You're ready, which seemed like forever. But I still tell kids today, you can do anything in the world you want to. You can be president if you want to. If you want it bad enough, you go for it. You fight for it. You work hard, and you go around the obstacles.
Yeah.
And
a quick question before we wrap up. If you were offered a role within the wrestling business to do something again, whether it be commentary, whether it be refereeing, whether it be anything at all, would you go back to the business to work?
I would consider it. It would depend on what it was. I mean, I never completely close a door. I would never go back to work for Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
Okay. Never. But that doesn't mean I hate wrestling. That doesn't mean I'm down on wrestling. In fact, I have a little girl right now that I'm training. I'm helping to train. Here's another quick story for you.
Yeah.
She, my daughter has a daycare, and she used to babysit this little girl, and her family, big time into wrestling. And last year she went to school, and her teacher gave them an assignment to write an essay on what they wanted to be when they got older, and to do the research on it. Well, her essay was done on, she wants to be a wrestling diva. And she did the research, she checked into it. She took her essay to school, and the teacher read it and said, "I'm sorry, this isn't a real job and I won't accept it." Now, this girl's a straight A student. Yeah, and she was pretty much told, you redo it or you take a 0. And she said, "Give me a 0." And this is Gemma. She's 13. Oops. Oh, no, you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
I'm going to show you a picture of Gemma. She's 13 years old and she's training. I don't know if you can see her or not. That's Gemma.
Yeah.
And like I said, she's training and she's doing a great job. She's, like I said, she's only 13, so she can't do any wrestling just yet, but she's being a valet and walking the guys out, and doing a little bit of commentary. And by the time she's 18, she's going to be so ready for this business. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously
she's very good. Very good. She's ready.
Yeah. What you said with the teacher there, and that's not a real job and whatever, it made me think about you in the 80s, where them saying like, "Oh, we can't have a woman referee, or we can't do this and we can't do that." So that's that story's come a little bit full circle. So that's a very nice way to you're probably thinking of you back then and her now being in a kind of a similar boat. So that's a very nice story.
Yeah, the more I thought about it, the more angry I became. I'm like, I don't care what a child wants to do. I don't care if they want to collect cockroaches for a living. You don't destroy a child's dream.